Sí, por favor, nos podemos ir sentando y así podemos seguir con la...
Be seated by now.
Luego en el café nos podemos saludar, si nos importa.
During the coffee break, we will be able to greet each other.
Anything from the
Bueno, pues buenos días a todos. Yo creo que después de...
Good morning to everybody. I think that after the opening session that we were having, which was really good, both on the part of the Vice President of the government and the ambassadors of Finland and Croatia, as well as the ambassador from Germany. Vice Minister, I think we can feel that we are very well accompanied in this activity that we are developing for the equal rights for women. It is important to receive this support because so that we can celebrate the Beijing +25 accordingly. I am Belén Crespo. I am the special advisor for the High Commissioner for the 2030 agenda, and the person who should be here was Cristina Gallard, but regretfully Cristina was not able to come because she has been attending the New York conference. I'm not going to go into detail with this, but of course this has been a very special moment for Spain because 1 year ago we presented the action plan for the 2030 agenda, and the first results have been, well, with the goal number 5, which is going to be presented in a roundtable, which has to do with women and girls, has been very important, and as well, some treaties have been signed related to this goal. Well, you have the plan described on the website, and so this plan has been achieved thanks to the support of the whole Spanish society, which has been very, very committed and very involved, helping us to draft this agenda, or this plan, sorry, and including a series of actions. I don't want to speak about the Agenda 2030, but I want to insist more on details on the process started by Beijing +25, which has like 25 years advantage over the Agenda 2030. But after the 5th anniversary of the Agenda 2030, with a lot of activities and creating synergies, we accomplished what was accomplished in Beijing +25. And I think the international aspect is key to all these aspects, and this is why we have here international members. We have UN Women with us. We have the Mexican ambassador here with us. We have the advisor of the French embassy, and I'm going to introduce them to you, and they are going to give us their feelings and their feedback on these processes, and I'm sure that they are going to be very interesting presentations. Okay, so I'm going to introduce the persons who are accompanying me at the table. Firstly, we have Ms. Alia Yassir. She was the regional director for UN Women for Europe and Central Asia. She is very well known, and her work and the work that she's carrying out is absolutely fantastic. She studied in Montreal, and she did a study on evolutionary ecology and biology, and she did an education postgraduate in Jordan, and specializing on gender studies. And this was carried out in under the UN Women umbrella. She worked on the West Bank as well, I forgot to mention this, and she has been part of a group of experts. Also, we have the presence of Louyot. She's the Councillor for Cooperation in the Embassy, the French Embassy, and she's the Director of the French Institute in Spain, which has an outstanding activity also in terms of that, well, are related to women. And she has held very high positions on cultural issues. She has been the cultural commissioner for France, and she has been working with Colombia, etc. And finally, we have Mrs. Roberta Lajous, the ambassador for Spain in Mexico. And this is a friend country, a brother country, or a sister country, as we heard it being mentioned in the words of Mrs. Carmen Calvo. And she's working in Spain and the Principality of Andorra. She's got a degree in international relationships, international relations, in the by the University of Mexico, and she's one of the main allies that we have in our table. Okay, welcome, Alia.
Fantastic job. So please tell us, you have the floor, and we can start with this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellencies and esteemed colleagues, good morning, and it's an absolute pleasure for me to be here today. I'd like to thank the government of Spain and also the Spanish Institute of Women and Equal Opportunities for holding this conference or this meeting. And just to say that the discussions that you will have here today themselves will feed into the Beijing+25 processes, both at the regional and the global levels. We've already heard as part of the opening that the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action represent the most visionary agenda, a global agenda for gender equality and women's empowerment. And the adoption 24 years ago by 189 countries is truly historic. It means actually a lot for me as well, personally, because it marks the beginning of my journey of work on gender equality and women's empowerment and when I entered the UN system. But the bottom line is that the promises that were made 24 years ago in '95 remain unfulfilled. We also heard that 2019 and 2020 are landmark or milestone years, and for many different reasons. This year we will celebrate 40 years of the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and we will commemorate 25 years since the International Conference on Population and Development, which tackled this now very sensitive topic of sexual and reproductive health and rights. Next year, as we've all become very aware, we will commemorate 25 years of Beijing. But again, I will reiterate, we are also commemorating 20 years since Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. It also marks 75 years since the creation of the United Nations. We, as UN Women, will be 10 years old, and we will be 5 years into implementation of Agenda 2030. So I think we all agree that this is a watershed moment, and it is a moment for us to really emphasize the urgency of the unrealized rights that are enshrined in the Beijing Platform for Action. And if we are going to be serious about the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, we need to put women and girls at the center of this agenda. So if we are going to be able to really tackle insecurity, injustice, and inequality, we really need to think about tackling all of these things in a holistic and a global manner, and this is the opportunity to do that. So, and this is very much in line with a global call to action, something that I witnessed myself here in Madrid yesterday as part of the global climate strike, which is a call for a better future, or at least a future for a younger generation. You will have a full schedule of discussions today, and you'll have the opportunity to go a little bit deeply into the issues, particularly from the perspective or the context of the European Union. So I won't go very much into that analysis, and you'll have several presentations. But I thought maybe we can use this opportunity to talk about the different processes that are going on, and so that you can reflect about how you can feed into those processes. The national review process was launched earlier this year, and this was done based on a guidance that UN Women developed, where there was a clear link made between the 12 areas of concern enshrined in the Beijing Platform for Action and the Sustainable Development Goals. So to encourage countries to be reporting on the progress on women's rights in line with the aspirations of the 2030 agenda. And this is an opportunity to renew the commitments that were made 24 years ago. So all the member states received this guidance through their missions, both in New York and in Geneva, and this started off the review process. We now have the reports from, I believe, 26 of the 28 EU member states. They were received by the UN Economic Commission for Europe, which is based in Geneva, which is the regional economic commission that encompasses the EU member states, but it encompasses a wider number of states. It's a total of 56 member states, which includes North America, and all the countries east of the European Union, all the way to Central Asia. My colleague Monica Lin, who sits in the Economic Commission for Europe, would have wanted to be here today, but we've had a discussion and I hopefully will be able to cover some of the issues that she would have tackled. But we, as UN Women Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia, are working very closely with the Economic Commission. Actually, we've received from 25 countries of the EU. I will not name and shame the 3 countries that have not submitted. I have them here, though. So these national review reports are being used to feed into a regional review, as you've heard, that will happen in Geneva on the 29th and 30th of October for all 56 member states of the UN Economic Commission for Europe. The registration for this meeting closes on Monday, actually, the 30th of September. So as of Wednesday, only 10 EU member states have registered, but we are hoping that that will change by Monday. Again, I have the list. I will not name and shame. So for us, we've been now working with the Economic Commission, and you will see on the UN ECE, just for ease of reference, on their website, you will see the regional synthesis report. So all the reports that have been received, and in addition to the 25 from EU member states, we have a total of 48 reports out of the 56. So it's actually a really good number. So the synthesis report clarifies some of the issues that you can maybe delve into a lot more detail, and you will have the presentation also from the European Institute for Gender Equality, so I won't go into the analysis. But it's clear that in the last 5 years, that the 3 main areas that have been prioritized are eliminating violence against women, women's economic empowerment, and women's political leadership and political participation. There is significant progress in criminalizing all forms of violence against women, and in no doubt due also to the Council of Europe Istanbul Convention. I don't know if you can hear me, it seems to be coming in and out. I don't know, there's a problem with the microphone. Okay, it's okay?
It's okay, yes.
Yes or no? Maybe no. There's a problem with the microphone. I don't know if we can... You can hear me? Okay, great. All right, so as I mentioned, to celebrate progress in criminalizing all forms of violence against women, this is something that is happening in the countries of the region in a significant way, and in no doubt also due to the adoption of the Istanbul Convention. Also, a priority area has been work-family reconciliation as a means to increase the participation of women in the formal labor force. And there's also been concerted efforts in increasing women's representation and political participation. In terms of emerging issues that were not tackled as much in Beijing 24 years ago that are being put front and center as part of a discussion is incorporating or doing more to incorporate a gender perspective into environmental protection, climate change, and disaster risk management. Prioritization of and redistribution of unpaid care and domestic work has been highlighted as a particular area of focus, and the need to tackle online forms of violence and having strategies that tackle this area. Now, as part of our mandate, UN Women has been actively advocating for the strong engagement of civil society organizations in all Beijing+25 processes at the national, regional, and global levels. At the regional level, there will be a multi-stakeholder forum, which is driven by civil society, and that will be held in Geneva on the 28th of October as a preparatory event for the intergovernmental meeting. There is a civil society task force that has been established, and the agenda is currently being finalized. You will find also information on the UNECE website that has been established for Beijing+25. Registration for the forum is already closed, and we're now working with the Women's Major Group to finalize the participant list and also to match the organizations that need funding to attend the meeting to make sure that we have as diverse a representation as possible in this forum. And we're lucky to have Sacha Gabizon here with us today, and she can provide you with a lot more information on what's happening. So I really encouraging you, if you haven't reached out already, to reach out to her to learn more about this. And the Women's Major Group has been an amazing partner for us in the preparations for this event, and also to think forward into next year, and I'll go into that a little bit more. So in addition to organizing civil society events, we're pushing very much to have civil society representation as part of official delegations, and we really encourage you to push for that as much as possible so that we can make sure that civil society voice is heard. And even if that is not possible, there will be those civil society organizations that have ECOSOC accreditation will be able to participate if they have registered in the intergovernmental meeting that will happen on the 29th and 30th. And even if you cannot, there are sufficient representatives that will carry the messages forward. So again, I will encourage you to reach out to Sacha during the course of this day. The European Institute for Gender Equality hosted an expert group meeting in May this year for EU member states and some of the other countries that would be part of the or candidate and potential candidate countries. And there will be a report that will be part of the Beijing meeting and part of the global processes. And I think that part of that will be presented here today, so that will encourage some discussion. But from our side, what we've noticed is that although participation of EU member states is quite prominent in regional and global processes, there are many countries in the wider region that are making really important and significant progress in terms of gender equality and women's empowerment, and they need to be more vocal in their support of the agenda. So we've been reaching out to those countries and focusing very much on civil society organizations. So we've had civil society-led what we're calling sub-regional consultations, so to make sure that they are also reflecting on the agenda and how to move forward, and really trying to include as much as possible the voices of women and girls that are subject to discrimination and exclusion. These consultations have been an opportunity to reflect on achievements as reported by member states, but also to underscore the challenges and the gaps that need concerted attention moving forward. So Moldova hosted one such consultation that included one EU member state, Romania, together with Ukraine, Belarus, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. And last week I was in Kyrgyzstan, where the consultation was held for Central Asia. And tomorrow, Sasha and I will be going to Skopje in North Macedonia, where the consultation for the Western Balkans and Turkey will be held. So you've heard that Finland has a particular role. We know that Finland is also hosting a meeting as of Monday and Tuesday in Helsinki in the context of the presidency of the Council of the European Union dedicated to Beijing+25. And as we are working with the official delegations of Moldova, Kyrgyzstan, and North Macedonia, we also ask Spain and Finland and all other countries that are hosting these kinds of consultations to carry the messaging that is coming from these meetings into Geneva, into New York, and into all other fora as we move forward. And in particular, one key message that we would like to advocate for is about how important it is to engage with civil society. When we're having a discussion on Beijing+25 or the achievement of the 2030 agenda, civil society organizations need to be not just consulted, but part of the conversation, and making some of the recommendations that they are putting forward need to be carried by official delegations. And I think this is something that we will call for more of. If I can give you some highlights from these consultations from what we are calling the program countries. So the program countries is where the UN still has a presence and is engaged, because it may give you a little bit of a different perspective in terms of or you can see the similarities in the issues that are coming out. There is recognition that there are very strong legal frameworks and alignment with international normative frameworks and conventions. This is something that characterizes the countries of the wider region, but there are still significant gaps in implementation, and there are also significant setbacks. There is a very clear backlash against gender equality and women's human rights across the region and across the world, and there is a very real threat to regression on the hard-won gains over the past 24 years. There is also the fact that women human rights defenders are facing threats, intimidation, and attacks in a culture or an environment of impunity. So we need more and better accountability. This is something that came out very strongly from the consultations, and this includes improving the availability and analysis of disaggregated data and statistics. There's also an emphasis on financing for gender equality, which includes financing for civil society organizations, and as well the gender equality institutional mechanisms that were fought for 24 years ago but remain largely weak and underfunded in many countries around the world. There was also an emphasis on dialogue, as I mentioned earlier, between governments and civil society, but also among countries, particularly countries that share borders. So there was an emphasis on tackling harmful gender stereotypes as a priority. We've heard that education was highlighted. This was really underscored in the consultations, as well as the role of media in tackling this. There's a need to tackle the political instability and conflict that affects many countries, even though in many countries it is a frozen conflict, so it's not making it into the news every day, but there are women and girls who are being affected. And aside from understanding the impact, the need to engage more women, particularly women from these countries I was mentioning, in the resolution of these conflicts. And so I would say that the initiative that was highlighted, a joint initiative of Finland and Spain, is very timely for this. I would say in terms of issues, there was also a lot of debate on whether we look at specific context as configurations of countries. So what you're trying to do today, how useful is it to look at it as EU-wide, for example, or how useful is it to look at Western Balkans or Central Asia versus adding the voice to a global movement. So I think there is a little bit of a tension there. There was also no clear way forward or agreement on engaging with religious leaders as well, whether this is something that is necessary and needed, or is there already a compromise in taking this forward. But the bottom line is that there's a clear call for governments to take urgent and intentional action and renew their commitments to gender equality, but have identified priority actions with very clear timelines. And Geneva will be an opportunity to do that. As previously mentioned, the Geneva meeting will not have a negotiated outcome document as such, but will be an opportunity to raise these issues, and they will be captured in a report from the meeting. There are already the background documents and the agenda for the meeting ready on the ECE website, and maybe that is something that can be circulated to all the participants so that you can have direct access. And there will be side events as well during these meetings, and EU member states are actively involved in this, so you can see all of that. Geneva will be the first regional review. Other regional reviews will take place after that, and all of these regional reviews and their reports will feed into the CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women, next year, which is dedicated to the Beijing+25. But there will be no priority theme, a review theme, or focus area. It will be dedicated to the Beijing+25. There will not be agreed conclusions, as already mentioned, but there will be a political declaration, which will most likely be negotiated in advance. So again, this is a critical period. If you want to influence what is in that negotiated political declaration, this is the moment to do it. What would be the key issues to highlight? And the CSW next year will be intended as a forum for real exchange between countries and between stakeholders. We expect a large number of participants, and we are very happy to have a country from the region. Armenia will be the chair of the CSW for the next 2 years. So I think there are also opportunities to advocate with the chair for certain issues. In May, and looking at the logo that you see here, we launched the campaign called Generation Equality, Realizing Women's Right for an Equal Future. And that's where I would like to sort of end my intervention, to explain a little bit what this is about. It is a campaign that has actually informed all of the things that I've been talking about so far, everything related to the Beijing+25 process, and everything that we would like to build on after that to feed into all the work on Agenda 2030. So we see an opportunity as UN Women to bring together different generations of women's rights activists. Okay. All right, I will make this short. And then hopefully there will be an opportunity. Okay. We're focusing on youth engagement, but also bringing the younger generation together with the activists that brought about the achievements encapsulated in the Beijing Platform for Action. Again, we're trying to encourage youth to be part of official delegations, but we want them to also take on work at the community level so that they become agents of change at a community level. They are the voice, so it's not this, we don't have a separation between the women's movement and meetings like this from the work that will happen at community level across the countries of the region. There's an opportunity for intergenerational dialogue so that we also are learning about the challenges that face a younger generation, but they also better understand the strategies that have been used to secure the gains that they are benefiting from. We have a task force. The EU is represented in this task force, but there is a larger group now that is going to be involved in what we're calling action coalitions. So this is really to drive forward a feminist agenda as part of the Beijing+25, but again to feed into Agenda 2030. So the Gender Equality Forum is foreseen as a global gathering for setting this feminist agenda, so that there is going to be a clear sort of timeline, as I mentioned, with clear priority actions that can be reviewed over the on a 5-year basis up to 2030. It will be launched in Mexico in May, and you'll hear more about that, and will culminate in Paris in July. And it's going to be part of a global public conversation. So I will not go into it, but maybe there will be an opportunity for question and answer, because it goes beyond these two events. It's the governments of Mexico and France are just lending their support and voice, but there will be lots of opportunities to engage in this forum and host activities and events around them, whether they are, there could be satellite events events that are part of this forum. This is something that can be, put forward. Running in parallel between, at the same time as these events, or being carried like a torch from Mexico all the way to France. So hopefully we'll have the opportunity to discuss it. But these action coalitions will involve civil society, member states, private sector, parliamentarians, trade unions, young people. I think it really is up to us to decide what is going to get us to the result. So also I am here to listen for ideas that I can take forward. And sorry for having taken so much time, but there's so much to say. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alia. I think that now you have the floor, and please.
Buenos días. ¿Está funcionando?
Sí.
Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por... ¿Se oye? No, no se oye. Ah, sí, ya. Buenos días a todas y todos. Muchas
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for this invitation to participate in this conference. I think it's a top-level conference. Congratulations to the Institute for Women on the organization and all the other organizers. Well, France, of course, is a country that considers that policies in favor of women are really important, especially the President of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron, has put this topic in the center of his political action, but he has also decided to launch feminist movement, and we're really proud of that. As a diplomat in my case, and as a woman, I think that it is very important. This is something that has to be implemented, of course, and developed. So this is why France, together with Mexico, has accepted to organize the forum that has been just mentioned, the Forum for the Generation of Equality, that has been organized under the umbrella of UN Women, and the context of which has been very well described. Well, part of a global system of events around Beijing+25. This forum has the goal of boosting again all the efforts in favor of gender equality, and especially to accelerate, to speed up the implementation of the 2030 goals. And this is why there will be a follow-up after the forum, as Alia has mentioned. As she said, it is open to every single stakeholder. Let me underline how important states are, because they play a structure and regulation role. In order to improve the situation all over the world, we need them. But civil society is also is very important to companies, development banks, organizations, etc. All these stakeholders will gather in 5 or 10 geographic and topic coalitions, and we consider that it is very important to have countries from different places in every single coalition in order to have, well, for example, a country from the north, a country for the south. I know that this is old-fashioned, but, well, and we also want to, well, we need to pick up some topics among all the important topics that have already been mentioned in terms of rights and sexual health, economic empowering, participation of women in politics and economy, but also topics like, for example, women and climate, women and technology, etc. What is very important too is that this forum will have a format that has never seen before in multilateral meetings, because there won't be undifferentiated countries in terms of participation or commitments. The participation of the states will depend on three cumulative criteria. First of all, the participation of the state chief of state. If there's no top-level participation, the state would not be able to participate. Secondly, the acceptance of commitments for women on a national scale. For example, joining the Biarritz Declaration about something, well, it's very important, of course. And thirdly, the participation in one or some action coalitions. These coalitions, of course, are very important, as has already been said, because, well, coalitions is another way to reach specific commitments, not only in terms of a general declaration at the end of the forum, but also to launch different coalition, the work of which will be measured. There will be a measuring system of the specific results of these coalitions, and that's the core of the system, so to speak. There will be a first meeting of the coalition stakeholders will take place in March, as has already been said. After that, they will meet for the first time or for the second time in Mexico, and the ambassador of Mexico will develop this part. It will be between the 7th and 8th of May 2020. And last but not least, the coalitions will become official at the top point of the in Paris in July next year, between the 7th and the 10th. So Spain and Europe will have a very important role to play in the forum. I would like to take the opportunity to say thank you for all the efforts that Spain has made in terms of women's rights and parity in the government, for example, and the big and humongous efforts against violence that we truly admire. I think that they have to be highlighted in Europe. Of course, the participation of some countries from the European Union, and the European Union as such, as has already been said, like the ambassador from Finland has said. So this is why we consider that Spain and the other countries in Europe should lead the coalitions, because every single coalition will have leading countries that will have the responsibility of accompanying the election of the topics, geographic areas, and the follow-up of the tasks that will be developed by these coalitions. And this is why we invite you to, well, from social, civil society, multilateral organizations, etc., governments, we invite you to reflect about the changes that you want for women's rights in order to present them at the Forum for Equality. It is a great opportunity for everybody, for us to progress. I think that it is the best initiative after Beijing. So I think that we can't miss this great opportunity. And last but not least, I would like to invite you all to visit the beautiful exhibition at Reina Sofia Museum about the feminist groups. And I think that it is a great example of our meeting. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias a
Much to people that have taken the floor, because I think that we really want in all these coalitions and to work all together, and I think that you're motivating civil society very much. And I give the floor to the ambassador, to Miss Roberta Lajous, who will encourage us to do things about the challenges that are ahead of us. After that, we'll have like 5-10 minutes of a Q&A session, but we have to be brief. I'm so sorry. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning and to see the interest of civil society in Spain. The fact that this Saturday morning, all of you and the ones that are in the room nearby and people that are outside wanted to be here to listen to what a group of countries is doing with UN, with the United Nations in order to boost the process of equality research of women under the umbrella of the United Nations. Well, I'm really proud of that. I have a speech, but I don't want to repeat many things that have already been mentioned by my colleagues. I would just like to tell you that Mexico, the new government that is in charge since December last year, wants to renew its historic commitment with women's rights. I have the honor of coming from a country that is totally committed with women's rights. You know that in 1975, Mexico hosted the first UN conference about women. And this paved the way for my generation. I was at the university by then, and it was very important to convey that expectations to young women, in the sense that the country was committed, that the United Nations were committed towards equality. I thought, well, I ended my degree in 1975. I thought that everybody was going to be a piece of cake, and my degree was going to be in terms of equality with men. That was not the case at all. But 40 years after joining the Foreign Affairs Service in Mexico, I can tell you that I have been a witness of the change that has happened in the world, of the change in the world thanks to that boost coming from the UN. Because as a diplomat, I attended the conference in Copenhagen in 1980, Nairobi in 1985, and I had the great honor, now I realize how big it was because of the outcome, of being part of the advising group of the UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali to prepare the conference of Beijing. Because the platform that was structured in Beijing is the base of what we still are working on and of what we still see in order to develop these, for example, these coalitions, how we hold this global conversation that Alia has mentioned, how Mexico and France will trigger an additional process to all these anniversaries that we are celebrating of 25 years of Beijing and other anniversaries that come all together next year for 2020 in order to give a new boost to this alliance. We think that it's important to trigger this dialogue in May at the city of Mexico, where we will define the most important gaps and we will set the action coalitions to tackle them. And by then, We will start with all these global dialogues so that in July, in Paris, we're able to set the agenda and the roadmap that will lead us to the General Assembly in September of that year. So next year will be a year again to boost everything that we've learned and everything that has triggered that change that we can see. When we see such an important number of women in the European Union, but also in other regions of the world, in important positions, when we see the parliamentary cabinets in a more important number, like for example in my own country, when we see that in Mexico we have progressed in terms of having a law that guarantees that candidates for the legislation power have to be 50% women. Well, today in Mexico, 48% of legislators on federal national level are women. That's the change that we are seeing. That's the change that we don't want to stop. And that's the change that we want to speed up in order not to have any delay or any step back. And so that the generation that comes after us has the possibility of living in a society where obstacles are not legal, where we have a cultural transformation that ends up with topics that harm us, like for example, are harmful for us, like for example violence against women. In Mexico, with the support of the European Union and the UN, we've just launched a specific program in order to tackle what we call the world feminicides. It is the program Spotlight that is starting to operate at different municipalities of the Republic, and we expect that during next 4 years it spreads out to all the country in order to focus the terrible problem of those feminicides that take place in a more significant way in places where women have moved from their place of origin because of the industrialization of the country. They've moved to other countries where they've separated from their families, where they live in a situation where sometimes they have empowered because they have they have salaries that are even better than men's, but they have no roots. So these women that are starting to enjoy the privileges of having a good salary, of having a good position, they are facing these anonymous situations of murders that we have to tackle with much bolder public policies. I would like to end up by saying, well, maybe you're wondering, and why Mexico? Why is Mexico assuming this leadership, and why are you doing it in such a powerful way? Well, let me answer that question. During the 19th century, there was a revolution where liberals succeeded. After civil war, after foreign intervention, and conservative parties were left behind. Since 19th century, since 1870, when we implemented the constitution, women were citizens and we were able to divorce. Well, the right to vote came later on, but it's a reality that compared to many other Spain-American societies that had an important religious and cultural relationship, well, we were able to have a much more powerful civil society and a much more important empowering of women. And today, we are able to adopt a feminist policy. And thank you very much for your attention.
Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias a las tres por estos.
Thank you very much for these motivational speeches, but also for paving the way to everybody in order to move on and to speed up all these actions that we want to develop. So now we saw the the Q&A session from the audience. Yeah, I'm Begoña, and I belong to Beijing+25 platform in Spain. To the regional director of UN Women, I'd like to tell her that the UNICE region is not very functional for the participation of civil society. With the US, with Canada, with these states, we have big problems, and this has had a negative impact for the commitment of the European Union. Today, 5 months after the fact that every single state has issued the report by country, there's no European Union report that could have helped us know what are the challenges. As the lady from France has said, if the governments do not structure the Beijing+25 discussion, civil society has many problems to channel the contributions. This region is not functional for us. And after that, I would like to ask both embassies, France and Mexico, I would like to ask them to have easy and accessible information so that civil society in Spain is able to know how the forums are developing. Thank you very much. Do you want, yeah, Alia, please.
I don't want to listen to myself. Yes, I think I caught the points that you were trying to raise in terms of the. I'm not sure that the current UN development system reform process is going to change the regional configuration of countries. I think we are going to remain in this very strange configuration. You're right, it's perhaps the least cohesive regional configuration that we have across the world. And it is, I wanted to say, this is the only region in this configuration of 56 countries that does not have a regional meeting ahead of CSW each year. So this is something, and the member states, actually it's the governments that are not keen to have this. We are in a process now, I mean, it's coming from the civil society consultations that we've been involved in, how important it is to have annual consultation meetings. We are looking into ways as UN Women to try and make that happen, understanding that there are resource constraints, but we will try to find a way to do that. And I want to say that that's why we think the Geneva meeting, and not just the Geneva meeting, all the meetings are so important to get those member states that are more progressive and more open to be speaking clearly in support of the civil society agenda, ensure the dialogue with civil society and it informs their interventions in these intergovernmental meetings, and to help us open up the space for civil society in these meetings. So I think there is a lot of advocacy that we need to do, and also to push back against the pushback. And the pushback is coming from some key member states that you've mentioned, and it's not only North America. I don't think, I'm a Canadian myself, I'd like to think that Canada will remain with a feminist agenda, but I think, yes, we have very strong member states, very geopolitically strong member states that are not so clearly supportive. So we hope that the action, this mobilization that needs to happen and needs to sustain momentum, and this is what I will ask them, when we're thinking about action coalitions, really think about the sustainability of the momentum. Let's not make these just events that we celebrate and then, you know, we forget the issues that have been put on the table. And I didn't understand the point on the EU report, because I think European Institute for Gender Equality is preparing that report. It's just not ready yet, but it will be ahead of the Geneva meeting. And I think that then the point will be made that to make it available to civil society organizations in time to inform the consultation around the Civil Society Forum. And I don't know if that answers.
Thank you very much. And yo creo que bueno, pues la parte de conocimiento.
Thank you very much. Part of knowledge of what both countries are doing, maybe you can answer this part. Well, this is a commitment for my part. We will keep you informed. Yes, yes, absolutely. I agree. But as Alia was mentioning, we need to gather all information in order to be able to inform well. This is very important, but we're going to convey this remark, a very well-founded remark, I have to say. Another question? Hello to all of you. My name is Antonia Avalos. I come from Mexico, and I'm here precisely because of gender violence in my country, or macho violence in my country, as I call it. I came 13 years ago from my country, but I have a lot of hope in the new government, but I understand that violence in Mexico is a structural thing. In August, last August, women went out to the street to cry out for this structural violence, for the injustice committed against the girl who was raped. And I'm in this country. I am part of the Latin American and Caribbean Women Network. Migrant women here have to be recognized and acknowledged as political subjects and our rights as cleaning ladies. We don't, or domestic workers, we cannot speak about equal rights if migrant women are not acknowledged as subject to equal rights. Our sisters in France have also been asking for our support for the law that has been passed recently, the law against gender violence, because they were not having statistics. We are part of the voice of these women from Argentina as well, and the women that say, enough, stop, enough of not having fair salaries, stop to violence against women, and we need to have more participation in this summit. We women's with domestic works, or all kinds of women. I mean, migrants, women in the streets, all of us need to have more participation and our voices heard. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Antonia. In your demand, I think that this is precisely what is going to be tackled with the actions that we're going to carry out. I don't think at this moment we need to answer or to give a response with measures, but only to do things that were done in a better way. Last question, please. Well, two questions, okay. Hello, good morning. My name is Ángela María Botropo Pulgarín. I come from Colombia. I also belong to the same network. And in the same line, I would like to draw your attention on the fact that on the absence of migrant women in such a key issue as what is held in this, or tackled about in this day. I was talking with Mercedes now, and she said, oh, we are including the name of migrant women in the CEDAW. But in our countries, we were organizing and preparing the going of our colleagues to Beijing. I was 25 years old at that moment, and I wanted to be in Beijing. And I'm in the organization, and I'm here. And as a migrant woman, I demand to have this participation, and so that positive actions are being carried out, so that we are present there, because we migrant women, we also build Europe. We are many, we are too numerous, and in fact we are political, transnational, transboundary citizens. And if we are not present, a significant part of the population will not be present, and therefore there should be a whole session or table dedicated to the situation of migrant women, because of this empowerment that we have or not have, because we don't feel welcome by the countries we are going to. And thank you very much. I'm very happy that we are united in this effort, and we can add up to the efforts of everyone. And adding different powers in our rucksack, let's say, as Mercedes is saying. Thank you very much. That was quick. Thank you very much for your intervention, a very timely one. And the very last question of this table. My name is Anabel Santos of the Association of Feminist Women, Subversive Women in Andalusia, where our headquarters is in Malaga. I want to thank the whole table for their information and their participation, and I want to demand from all spaces the funding. We cannot speak about civil society in Geneva in a month without knowing whether we are going to have scholarships or how are we going to articulate our institutions. There is a lack of consistency in the speech, in the discourse. I want to demand this because this is really urgent. Mexico is coming, Paris is coming, New York is coming, and at this time of the year, I remember that years ago we had this solved already much earlier. But also I want to speak a little bit about intergenerational dialogue. The forum Beijing+25 finalized with the intergenerational forum. And here there is the group of people that represented us in this forum in Spain, from Spain, I mean. And my question is, where are those organizations that were participating in the intergenerational dialogue? They are leaders in different countries due to process, sustainability, and motivation. And the other thing that is always in my mind, I remember that in the forum there were girls with the UNICEF program. They were acting as journalists, and they were interviewing us at that time. And they were telling us at the same time the reality of girls in their countries. For example, I knew about the reality in Nepal thanks to an 80-year-old girl. And maybe we could make a follow-up of where those girls are nowadays. And if any of them could come and tell us about their proposals or their achievements, that would be great, I think. Thank you very much. So Alia and Yassir is going to answer, but before, you can tell us about the forum. What forum of UNICEF are you referring to? Because I'm not acquainted with this forum. So could you, well, during the coffee break, you can tell me this.
Thank you very much. I wanted to speak about the point also raised earlier on migrant women, and I think this is precisely what you can cover in today's discussions as you go in the different sessions in terms of trying to identify key groups that are maybe excluded from the mainstream discussions that need to be brought forward, or the issues need to be carried by the larger feminist agenda. And to say that migrant women is a very broad term, and it manifests differently. I think just across the 56 ECE member states, it's estimated that 10% of the population are people on the move for different reasons, you know, whether it is economic pressure or conflict or climate change. So this is, and to categorize will be really important. And this is where, yes, it's not about a particular region, there's a global issue here. And, you know, people are on the move, but this is a region that is experiencing this. But also from our consultations, Roma, women and girls are coming out, women with disabilities, they feel that they're not part of the conversation, members of the LGBTQ community, young people, and rural women, rural population across these countries. 60% of your populations in the EU and broader are living in rural areas, and how much is that being taken into consideration? So something to take into consideration in the discussions. In terms of the financing, we are aware of this issue. We are working on it, and I think there will be an opportunity to look into that a little bit further. But I think also to think in creative ways about how we can make sure that people that cannot make it physically into a room are part of the conversation. That's the whole thinking behind this forum, the Generation Equality Forum. Let's think in a different way. Can we leverage information communication technology to make sure that we're having a conversation that is inclusive as much as possible so that it's not just linked to people who are sitting physically in a room, while understanding that it is important to have key people in that room. And I think, Sasha is here, she'll speak to this. Yeah, this is Sasha. And can address some of these issues. But you can count on us to really be pushing. I mentioned it in my intervention. It's something that we are bringing to all our discussions with all governments, that it is important to ensure that there is financing to enable the active participation of civil society. So I'll stop there, but really I think this is very important, this conversation, and what you will have in your sessions will really feed into what we're trying to do. So I think let's continue. Thank you.
Bueno, pues yo creo que con esta respuesta podemos dar por terminada.
I think with this answer, I think we can finish. I hope that it was interesting for all of you. And in my case, counting with 3 women and 3 experts on and dealing with the issues of women with these 3 experts has been highly useful for me, and I hope it was useful also for all of you. It was useful for me and for you, I mean. Thank you.